Things just got worse and worse and worse as the night went on. Again, valiant effort down the stretch for the Bucs. Just too little, too late. Let's go down and we'll see what Coach Fletch and the rest of the crew has to say. As always, go Bulls. So let's head into the locker room right now and see what the guys have to say about that one. Wow. Where do the Buccaneers go from here? What an incredible atmosphere. What a good win for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They snapped a 7-game winning streak. How we feeling, Bucs Nation? It's time to party, baby.
He ain't going nowhere. He ain't going nowhere. Liam Coen is staying in Tampa with the Bucs. What up, everybody? Welcome to the Recher podcast here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter/X. Big news. Liam Coen turns down. He's not going to Jacksonville. He's staying here, getting a pay bump with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He'll be one of the highest paid coordinators in all of football. That is what we're starting the show with today. What did you expect? Something else? Of course not. I want to hear from you. Questions, comments, concerns. Let me know how you're feeling about this big news, the biggest news in the Tampa Bay area. Nobody else is live right now talking about Liam Coen and the Bucs, except us right here on the Recher podcast. Follow me on all social media platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. I am everywhere. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Let's say you forget at noon that we're on. Boom. That notifications bell, they're going to hit you up. They're going to let you know, hey, don't forget the Recher podcast. And we are here for you talking about the biggest news of the day. Liam Coen staying in Tampa Bay. We're going to keep this conversation going pretty much the entire first hour on the podcast. Rob Maaddi is going to join us, AP senior NFL writer. What is his thoughts on the entire situation? Also, at 1 o'clock, we'll have Marc Topkin joining us from the Tampa Bay Times. It looks like Taylor Walls is staying in Tampa Bay. Also, the the Baseball Hall of Fame. We saw last night 3 Hall of Famers inducted into the new class. I had 3 of the 4. Not bad. CC Sabathia, Ichiro Suzuki, and Billy Wagner will be part of that class going into Cooperstown this summer. And then at 1:30 today, we'll talk to our guy Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. Not pretty last night for the Bolts as they blow a lead to the Montreal Canadiens, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because right now we're starting the show. Liam Coen staying here in Tampa with the Buccaneers. How are you guys feeling? David Velasquez, Jason hit Liam with a bag. Never a doubt. Liam returning from our guys Buccaneers podcast. Our guy Nick in Sarasota. If we had a New York Post style paper here, tomorrow's back page headline would be head coach in waiting. Well, we do know, and this was reported by our guy Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times, there's no literature going Liam Coen's way saying that he's a coach in waiting, like we saw with Gerard Mayo, with Bill Belichick up there in New England. Nothing like that. He realizes the stability, and this is why, ever since this whole situation arose, I was not sold. You know it. If you've been listening, if you've been watching here on the Recher podcast, I was not sold that Liam Coen was going to leave for Jacksonville. Now, if it was somewhere else, then hey, it's somewhere else. You look at the opportunity, you chip your hat, you go, hey, man, there's only 1 of 32. Good luck. But that job is not so enticing right now in Jacksonville. Ben Johnson said no. Liam Coen says no. They'd rather go somewhere else. Ben Johnson, now the head coach with the Bears. Liam Coen saying, I'd rather stay as the OC with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And let me just fill you guys in with this kind of whole thing, right? This has just as much to do with the dumpster fire in Jacksonville as it is here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Just think about it. If this was a little bit more of a cushier job there in Jacksonville, if there was some stability, then I think he would have went there. I mean, you already have the quarterback. You have Trevor Lawrence. There's no way that a offensive mastermind like Liam Coen would look at a guy like Trevor Lawrence and go, nah, I don't think I can work with a guy like that. Hell yeah, he could have. But Trent Baalke as the GM, Shad Khan as the ownership, it's scaring people away. It is scaring people away. And then you look at it and you go, the grass isn't greener on the other side. I got a really good thing here in Tampa. I got a structure around me that puts me in a position to succeed. Why the hell would I leave right now? I know in terms of what your job title is, that would be a step up. But as far as your surrounding environment and the success and the ability to succeed, you have a much better chance of doing that next year with the Buccaneers than you do with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think that's any type of discernment from anybody that knows football out there. It's a beautiful thing that Liam Coen is staying here. The continuity is key. That means Todd Bowles isn't going anywhere. He knows what he's getting from the Glazers to Jason Light to the entire crew. It looks like Spytek and Greenberg are staying too, because the Jets went in a different direction for the GM. So did the Tennessee Titans. So it looks like the gang is all coming back. Spytek, Greenberg, Light, Bowles, Coen. We know we have Baker. We know you have Bucky Irving. You know you have 4/5 the offensive line. If you're Liam Coen, and again, I've been saying this since the beginning, Liam Coen is going to look at this the same way that Ben Johnson did last year. I'm a hot commodity. I'm an OC. I'm looking around. There are other opportunities out there, but is that the one? Is that the one where I'm going to change everything that I know? Am I going to take a risk on that place? Because we've seen it before. We've seen it before where guys take a leap of faith. They go to a job that may not be the greatest environment, the greatest situation, and then they poop the bed, and in 2 years they're back on the streets. Smart move by Liam Coen. Again, this has just as much to do with how great everything is here in the Tampa Bay area as bad as it is there in Jacksonville, because the quarterback is there. And I know our guy Trevor Sickham, I'm trying to get him on the program for tomorrow, Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter/X. He mentioned this about they have Trevor Lawrence, but it's not a Trevor Lawrence issue. You always think as a coach, put me in the right spot. Put me over there. I'll change things, whether it's with the quarterback or the organization as a whole. For Liam Coen, he looked at that situation and goes, regardless of the picturesque, the statuesque Trevor Lawrence that looks like if you could create one in a lab, that's the kind of quarterback you'd probably want. Number 1 overall pick, a guy that was you want to talk about a guy coming out of college that was ranked as high as the Andrew Lucks and the Peyton Mannings of the world. He was a can't miss prospect. The fact that Liam Coen looked at that situation with that quarterback and that type of potential in him and said, nah, I'm good. I'm staying with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, there's a lot that goes into it. And it's not just the Bucs. It helps, but you look at the situations between the two teams. And again, I go back to my argument for why we shouldn't take Todd Bowles for granted. He is part of that safety net. He's part of that calming influence with Jason Light, with the rest of the players, rest of the people in the front office, the players in the offense that Liam Coen knows he's coming back to. It's a beautiful thing. And I feel very happy for our fans here in the Tampa Bay area and abroad, because there's so many times in sports you're let down and guys leave and guys get traded or they sign somewhere else. Today, Bucs Nation, you can revel in this. You can be happy that a guy chose Tampa Bay. Shout out to Anthony and Christopher. Guys, hit that like button if you can. I want to see that like amount go up today. Our guy Dolan, what up, Jay? Hell yeah, Liam Coen staying. We do get to keep nice things. Yeah, I figured that Jacksonville gig was going to be super tough, and that there was unfinished business here. Yeah, and I'm sure Ben Johnson felt that same way last year, staying with Detroit, not taking a head coaching job the last cycle. Gave it another run this year. I thought he did another great job with Jared Goff, and then he goes to the Chicago Bears. Next step in his development, next step in his career. Good for him. I don't think that it was just because it was tough in Jacksonville, right? People understand that there's difficult situations. But when you look at a guy like Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning coach, when he had Trevor Lawrence, and you could just tell he was so just miffed every single week at the podium. There's something there. And the fact that Trent Baalke, the GM, is still in Jacksonville, I mean, it's not an appealing job. We're going down the same road for the Jacksonville Jaguars that we went through last year with the Carolina Panthers. This guy doesn't want it. This guy doesn't want it. This guy doesn't want it. So what's going to end up happening is Jacksonville is going to take a guy that was certainly not their first choice. Maybe they go down the list a little bit more. I know Patrick Graham is one of their options. I know Robert Saleh was one of their options. And if you saw on Twitter, I did my part. I said that Robert Saleh would be a home run hire, and I was arguing with every single Jaguars fan that took the bait. You all did it. I don't like to troll, and I don't troll very often, but when I do, I try to do my part. I did everything I could to kind of throw them off the scent with Liam Coen. I don't think it worked, but hey, it was some fun as well. Bart Hill, what's going on, buddy? I believe the chance on Chris Godwin staying just got greater. David, I don't think Chris Godwin's going anywhere, brother. I don't. Dead cap over 18 million. He's coming off of his second season-ending injury. It just makes too much sense for him to stay here. Don't go nowhere. Stay here. You know, if you are in the building, you're going to be working with one of your best friends and Mike Evans. You got other receivers in there like Jalen McMillan that can take some of the heat off of you. You know, you got Bucky Irving, and most important, you have two guys in Baker Mayfield that can get you the football, and Liam Coen, who runs an offense that puts you in a position where you, at this point, at 5 games through last season, were arguably the best receiver in all of football. It wasn't like Chris Godwin is thinking right now, man, I'm going back to a Dave Canales-led offense. I'm going back to a Liam Coen-led offense, and I was balling. Over 50 catches, over 500 yards, over 5 touchdowns when he lost the rest of the season due to injury. He's got to be licking his chops trying to get back here. David Terry, Liam needs a wheelbarrow for his payday. Hey, good for him. I'm happy for the guy. He's earned it. Mike Frimter, my guy. Mikey, what's up, pal? Continuity is king to me. Baker and the offense need that. Now we can focus on the defense and some upgrades. This whole off season is about improving the defense. Now, you do have to fill the guard spot. Maybe they bring a Ben Bredesen back if it's affordable. Keep an eye on Elijah Klein. Draft pick from last year, UTEP, a kid that played a lot of different spots in preseason. I know that they really liked him. Keep an eye on Elijah Klein. I think that could be, when you look internally for a solution at that spot, I think that could be a guy. Matthew P., let's effing go, Lord Liam. Ryan B., always supporting as well. Liam didn't go. Yeah, he let him know. He didn't even go, Chris. He said, no, I'm staying here. Lady Evil, what a day, Jay. January 22nd should be a Tampa Bay holiday from now. That changes all the dynamics for the offseason. What a relief. I'm going home from work and opening a cold one. Good for you. And be safe out there because it is freaking cold outside. I actually just walked around outside before the show. I just wanted to get the juices flowing. It's cold out there, man. I got the heat on in the house, and I very rarely put the heat on here. Baker gets his first repeat OC ever in the NFL. Yeah, in year 8. How great is that? Pay Godwin, I'm with you. Nick says, if you're a Man U fan, how do you feel today with this cross-sport dueling philosophy? We're going to talk about that, hopefully, with Mark Ogden, who came out with that for ESPN. He said, hey, Jalen, what's going on? Okay. So Mark Ogden actually just got back to me. So Mark Ogden reached out to, he's the ESPN writer, covers soccer, and he just put out something today about the reason why Manchester United doesn't come to Tampa is because they don't want the players to see the facility here in Tampa, because they're so much better than they are in Manchester. So I'm trying to get a hold of Mark Ogden, trying to get him on. He's reaching out to his superiors there at ESPN. That should be a good one. Ren Dax, not to jump too far ahead, but the team needs some defensive position coach changing. You get a tier 1 edge and off-ball linebacker that can cover. I'm with you, Ren, and I said this yesterday on the program. If you missed it, go check out all of my social media platforms. I put it out there. The Bucs have to make a splash at the pass rushing spot. Outside linebacker. Go get a dude. Go get a hoss. Max Crosby's that guy. Pay the man. I don't care. This is not a one-trick pony. This is the complete opposite of what the Atlanta Falcons did when they traded for Matthew Judon. This is the complete opposite than signing a guy like Khalil Mack, who's going to be a unrestricted free agent at 34 years old that had 6 sacks last year and 20 tackles. I don't want any part of Khalil Mack. I'm going to say it again. That was the big news today before the Liam Coen news came out. Khalil Mack looking for a new place to play. You want a guy that's on the downside of his career that had 6 sacks last year when he's playing on the opposite side of Joey Bosa and in a decent defense for Jim Harbaugh last year. He had 6 sacks last year. You think he's going to do better with the Bucs next year? Not a chance. I don't want a guy that is on the wrong side of 30, that if he's not rushing the passer and doing it at a high level like we saw earlier in his career, like the Bucs cannot become that team. Don't become that team that are bringing guys in and just signing them because they have big names. Oh, wow, let's get that guy because he was a great player in 2020. No. Go get Max Crosby right now. Trade for that man. I don't care what it costs. Well, I don't want 2 1s. I know somebody brought that up. 2 first-round picks. No first-round picks. You don't got to do all that. Find a way. Send him a pick in a couple of years. Second-round pick. A second and a third. A second and one of your running backs. That's fine. Get Max Crosby in here. He's 27 years old. You'll be able to figure out whatever the contract is. This is a guy that left it all on the field for a team last year that was garbage. Even when he's not rushing and getting to the passer, he's making plays on the defensive line, making plays with tackles for loss. He is a great guy that your younger players can learn from. Max Crosby is the guy. Don't settle for anything less than a top-tier pass rusher. That is one of those things. That is one of those like check marks that you have to have with the Buccaneers in the 2025 season. You have to have an elite pass rusher. Not a growing pass rusher. I hope this guy's going to work out. Maybe this guy will get 10 sacks. Give me an established guy on the outside that can get to the mother effing quarterback. Please. Now re-sign Godwin and LV and show up the pass rush in the secondary. I'm with you. Rich Storm, what would Jamel Dean's trade value be after the disappointing post-contract performance and injuries? I don't want that. I don't want to get rid of Jamel Dean. You got to throw numbers at those situations. He's a guy that gets banged up a lot. Yes, I understand. But that is one of those positions, unfortunately, where guys miss time. We saw it with Carlton. We saw it with Jamel. We saw it with Zion. Like Zion, for the most part, was there, but he got banged up throughout the entire season. Don't trade him away because he hasn't played great. Bring other guys in there so that you can utilize him in a place where he's at his best. Everybody was talking. Think about this, guys. Everybody was talking when Bucky was playing so well. Oh, now you can trade Rachaad White. I wouldn't be so quick to trade Rachaad White. You never know what's going to happen. Fortify your depth. That was going to be what I was going to say today about this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team before this Liam Coen situation came down. The depth on this team is something that has to change on the defensive side of the ball. I don't want to subtract pieces. I want to add pieces to that defense so that if you do lose a guy, because we know it's inevitable, you have other guys that can step up. We talk about the next man up mentality. We saw it in spades on the offensive side of the ball this year, but defensively, not great. Not great. And I know what Ren's saying. Light doesn't like to use the team's draft capital for players, but Super Bowl winning offense, go get that edge stud. I'm with you, Ren. I'm with you. I'm not talking about mortgaging the future. I'm not talking about a Deshaun Watson type of deal. But every once in a while, you got to take a swing. You got to take some kind of swing and add a guy to a team that is that close. You're close, man. You're in the hunt. You're winning the division year after year. I could give 2 shits what the rest of the division looks like. That doesn't matter. People want to throw that at the Bucs like it's a terrible thing. Yeah, well, they won the division, and the division sucks. Who cares? That doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, you're one of the people. You're one of the teams that are in there with the opportunity to make a long postseason run and possibly win the Super Bowl. That's what you want. When the playoff games start, nobody goes, well, you won a shitty division. Nobody cares. Did you win or did you lose? It's a zero-sum business. It's black or white. The Buccaneers didn't even win that crappy division when they won the Super Bowl back in 2020. Who cares? Nobody looks at that Super Bowl, the second one in this franchise's history, with Tom Brady at the helm, with no preseason, with no training camp, with Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown and Evans and Godwin and Fournette and JPP and Sue and Devin White and Levante David and all those guys. You remember those players. That's what you remember about the Buccaneers Super Bowl. You don't give a shit about the division. You made the playoffs. That's the only goal throughout the regular season. The entire goal for the regular season, other than get 1,000 yards from Mike Evans, is to find a way to get into the postseason. Be one of those teams that has a chance. Be one of those 7 teams that has a chance to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. Why not? Don't apologize. Do not apologize for making the playoffs, ever. It's such a lame discussion, such a lame thing for people when they're like, the division sucks. Who cares? They don't decide. It's not like the Buccaneers have we're going to play in the NFC South. We're going to play that one. We're going to play those guys every year. They don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. Chris Cole says, Myles Garrett, please. Yeah, I wouldn't hate that either. You want to go get Myles Garrett? He wants to get the hell out of Cleveland because why the hell wouldn't you? I'm with you. Myles Garrett and Max Crosby are those two guys. I think Max is probably a little bit more healthy, so I'd probably go with him. And I really do like how Max Crosby can make a difference in the game without sacking the quarterback. Just watch those games. He's a menace. He's good in covering the run. He's a guy that can make plays in the open field. And I think he would enjoy being here. He's a guy that, again, he's trying to do whatever it can to make it work there in Las Vegas with the Raiders. Even though everybody around him, and especially in this game, where people look at teams that just absolutely start shitting the bed and like, I want out. Get me out of here. You got Tyreek Hill. After all the things that Miami has done to try to placate that guy, he's like, no, I'm not playing the fourth quarter. I'm out of here. There's business decisions that get made all the time, right? We saw it from Devondre Campbell this year with the 49ers. They wanted him to go into the game. He's like, nah, I'm good. You got a guy in Max Crosby that is in his prime. He's one of the best players in all of football, in my opinion. And he's going out there every Sunday and putting his body on the line because that's the right thing to do. That is the kind of guy that you want to build around. That is the guy. I'm telling you, man, I am not one of those people all the time that are like, go get this guy or sign this guy or, hey, make this big, turn into a fantasy football manager. That's just not me. I understand that there's a realistic part of this whole scenario. And I know Jason Light is probably not too likely to do this because he doesn't like giving up draft capital. But there's certain players in the game that you want to make an adjustment to your game plan for. And you look at what the Eagles were able to do, bringing in Saquon Barkley. You look at what the Ravens were able to do, bringing in Derrick Henry. And I know they're running backs. But, I mean, specifically, let's look at the Eagles. Look at their team. You're telling me the Eagles don't like to build through the draft? Okay, they got A.J. Brown via trade, but they drafted Jalen Hurts. They drafted Devontae Smith. I think they drafted all of their starting offensive linemen. They drafted Kenneth Gainwell. They drafted Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. And all right, they did, and they went out and got Zach Bond in free agency. There you go. There's a great example. A guy that has fortified the middle of their defense, but they also drafted the two corners this year. They drafted a guy like Nakobe Dean, right? There's a lot of players on that team. All right, yeah, they go out and they sign. It's got to be a balance. You signed a Darius Slay, or I don't know if they signed him or they traded for him. Then they bring in a C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Like, you have to have that mix. And when you have a guy that can really upset the apple cart and you plant your flag in the ground, like, things are going to be different on the defensive side of the ball this year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is a way to do it. And you're not just doing it because of the name on the back of the jersey. You're doing it because of the player that's wearing the jersey. Again, I've watched a lot of Max Crosby this year, and you see so many bad things on tape from players on bad teams. You see him giving up on plays. You see him sitting out plays. They tapping their helmet. They want out. I didn't see that from him at all. That's the kind of guy that you want here in the Tampa Bay area. But again, the big news today is Liam Coen staying with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is great news. It's great news. And when you think about it, and I'm sorry, some of this other news is coming out, and I'm seeing it from our guy Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times. Rick just tweeted out, Liam Coen's deal is believed to be similar to that of Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, who reportedly earns $4.5 million a year. Woo-wee! $4.5 million a year. And then 20 minutes ago, Jordan Schultz saying former Jets head coach Robert Saleh is flying into Jacksonville tomorrow for a Friday meeting with Shad Khan, Trent Baalke, and others, with Liam Coen out of the running. Many around the league view Saleh as a potential favorite, though it wouldn't be surprising if the Jaguars expanded their head coaching search. It is coming up all roses right now for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And you look at Liam Coen, again, if you're standing where Liam Coen is today, and you looked at the two options, right? You look at the Jacksonville Jaguars and you say, all right, Trevor Lawrence, franchise quarterback, even though he probably hasn't reached his potential yet, but he did have the playoff win a couple of years ago. Okay. I know you got ETN. You got Brian Thomas, which is a big coup for them. Fantastic. I've just drafted an LSU and Ohio State wide receiver, and I think he'll be okay in the draft any year. So there are pieces there. And I think you look at the division too, and okay, fine. For those people that want to use the division argument, the AFC South isn't great. I mean, Houston's a good team, right? But the Colts, they're around a 500 team. The Titans, they got the number 1 pick in the draft. So that wasn't as appealing to him as some other people may think. I think it's both. I do think it's a little bit of both. I think it is the comfort of being here in the Tampa Bay area and knowing, hey, I'm going to be able to go do my thing again with people I like. There's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot that goes into the comfort. There's a lot that goes into things that we don't even think about. And it's something that, talking to Ian, and don't forget the Beckles and Recher podcast today at 3:00. We will be live at 3. And that's one thing that I've talked to, whether it was Ian or Denard Span or some of the other players or former players here in the Tampa Bay area. Well, like I ask, what's one thing that either media members or fans don't get when it comes to players or coaches or people that are involved with the professional sports? And to a man, the answer almost every time is that there's so much other stuff that goes on off the field, off the ice, off the court. The family stuff, the living arrangements. You know, I go back to Brandon Hagel when he signed with the Tampa Bay Lightning, or when he got traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and his head was like, it was like one of the most awkward press conferences of all time because he had no idea. He didn't even know where to get groceries. He barely knew where he was going to live. That is a part of the human element, especially when you have your choice. It's one thing when you don't have a choice, like Hagel, but when you have a choice, like Liam Coen, and you're like, man, I like it here. The people around me are good dudes. We know that we can be successful. We got a chance to run it back. I think I can even be better because I've said it here and I'll say it again. Liam Coen still needs to grow as a play caller. He's not a finished product. You look at some of the games last year and you look at some of the mistakes that he made. It's going to happen. This is first year as an OC in the National Football League where it was his job. It wasn't flawless. Year 2, you would think it's going to get better because he's a smart guy and he's familiar with the pieces around him. Can you imagine Chris Godwin healthy for an entire year? Jalen McMillan and Bucky Irving in year 2? Graham Barton in year 2? Baker Mayfield, obviously another, year into his career, but his second year with it's just him and Liam. And if you go back to last year, when Liam Coen got the job, there was a video that the Buccaneers posted of Baker Mayfield greeting Liam Coen in the parking lot over at the Evan Hell Training Center at One Buccaneer Place. That bond was built and fortified even before that day, and it has only gotten stronger here. Because Liam Coen looks at this situation here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and goes, this may not be my forever home, but in 2025, that is where I want to be. And I think everybody, whether it's Liam, the Bucs, or all the entire Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan base, that's what you got to focus on. Just focus on 2025. Let 2026, that's a question and a conversation to have for another day. Because the discussion over the last couple weeks was, what's the deal with Liam Coen? Should they keep him at the expense of Todd Bowles? If he does leave, who can the Buccaneers bring in as another offensive coordinator? And I told you right here on the show, I didn't think they were going to be shit out of luck. I thought they would have been okay because this job is a lot more appealing now than it was the last couple of years. And you know who just spoke on behalf of that sentiment? Liam Coen. Because he, for a multitude of reasons, decided, I'm not going to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'd rather be the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And as Rick Stroud reported from the Tampa Bay Times, it looks like $4.5 million for Liam Coen. Vic Fangio territory. That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. That's how you have to. That's how you keep a guy here that is going to be an OC for a team that is looking to build on what they did this year. All right, let's bring him in. Rob Maaddi from the AP. I mean, Rob, it doesn't get much better than this. Our topic A with Liam Coen and the Buccaneers, man. This kind of stuff writes itself. Thanks so much for joining us. What was your kind of initial thoughts when this news came out today?
Yeah, I wasn't shocked because I think we kind of got the idea, the feeling that Liam Coen, when he spoke, it might have been before the last game or before the playoff game, when he said, hey, I'm 39 years old. I don't necessarily need to be a head coach right now. And it kind of gave us some insight into what he was thinking. I'm going to do the interviews. I'm going to put myself out there, get the experience. It's important for these guys to see what organizations want, to make sure they are prepared for whether it's now or down the road, to have a coaching staff, have everything in place in mind. But at the same time, he wasn't necessarily eager to go running out the door if the right fit wasn't there. And if it came down to a situation like Jacksonville, where Trent Baalke's on his fourth head coach since he's been there since 2021, and a team that just had 2 winning seasons with a Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson. Things go just completely awful for them this year. He's out the door. You want stability as a head coach. You want to make sure that you're in an organization that's set up to win. And being in Tampa Bay, being with the Buccaneers, Jason Light is a GM who obviously has that pedigree. And listen, I'm biased. I live in the Tampa Bay area. If I could live anywhere where there's an NFL team, and I have that option, I chose to be here. Like, this is a great place to live, a great place to raise a family. And I think getting more money, Jay, for Liam Coen, and potentially the possibility of, depending what happens in the future with Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers, that could be his job. So people have talked about, well, the New England Patriots and his history there, and that could have been his dream job, his dream scenario, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe as a kid growing up. But obviously they went in a different direction with Mike Vrabel, and perhaps the Buccaneers in the long run will be Liam Coen's dream job. I think it's a huge win for Baker Mayfield, this offense, this team, this organization, that he gets to stay, that he's sticking around. And it was great that they stepped up and paid him to make sure that he's up there with the upper echelon, the top tier of coordinators.
Rob, do you think this had more to do with, or how much do you think this had to do with the instability of the Jacksonville Jaguars and the stability of the Buccaneers? Because I think a lot of it, if this was an ideal situation, in my opinion, in Jacksonville, where it's like the owner, the GM, you have the franchise quarterback there. So I think it would have been, okay, maybe this might be the opportunity for me to go. You're not leaving too far from Tampa. I think it had to do with a little bit of both, the stability and the instability. What do you say to that?
100%. I think it's a combination. I think you look at only Liam would know how much he weighed into Jacksonville's instability and what he has here in Tampa Bay. Is it a 75, 25, 50, 50? But I think it's a combination. If it was a perfect scenario and you have an opportunity to be a head coach and you got a franchise quarterback that you feel really is that guy, I think there's some questions, Jay, about Trevor Lawrence. I think there's some, and he's been paid to be an elite guy. He's been paid to be a franchise quarterback. He's led him to that playoff win where they came back down 27, 24, nothing, whatever it was at halftime. But I think there are some legitimate questions about his accuracy, whether or not, if Doug Peterson couldn't take him to another level, and we know what Doug Peterson did. I was there in Philly when he took Carson Wentz from 2016 as a rookie to 2017 MVP candidate, and then won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. And then obviously there was some regression there with Carson Wentz. But we all thought Doug Peterson teamed up with Trevor Lawrence is going to be that next step that Trevor needs to become a top tier, an elite quarterback in the NFL. And certainly Liam Coen could be a guy who could have helped him do that. We saw the success he had with Baker Mayfield, but there's no guarantees there, and there's some question marks there. So I think there's some instability there. The GM situation, he could be on his last high. There could be some, and there have been some issues in the past, right, with Jim Harbaugh and Trent in San Francisco. So that could have been a little bit of a detraction for Liam. But I think when you compare that to what he has with the Buccaneers, knowing that they had a ton of success this year, but they still left a lot on it. They should have won that game against the Washington Commanders. As great of a story as the Commanders and Jaden Daniels are, and they're in the NFC Championship game, and they went into Detroit and won that game and upset the number 1 seed. They were this close, a yard maybe, from losing to the Buccaneers in that wild card game, 2nd and 1, and 3rd and 1, and things go awry for the Bucs. So they know how close they are to potentially being that team in the NFC Championship game playing for a Super Bowl.
Rob, what do you make of the Buccaneers on the defensive side of the ball? And we saw Casey Rogers. It looks like he's interviewing with the Packers, amongst other guys that are trying to fortify their defensive line with a better coach. But what changes do you think they need to make so that they're having a defense that rivals this kind of burgeoning and growing offense?
Yeah, it's the biggest issue they have. It's their defense that held them back this year. It's held them back going back to, Jay, you can go to the Rams divisional round playoff game where they were down 27-3, fought all the way back to tie that game. Looked like you were going to go to overtime, and then there's a defensive collapse in the final 30 seconds where Cooper Kupp catches 2 deep balls and they set up a game-winning field goal, and Brady can't go for back-to-back. And I think, and obviously the next year or two, they had some issues in the run game that kind of took away from their ability to have a balanced offense, and that was a little bit of a problem. But this year, you put it all on the defense. And injuries in the secondary, and Antoine Winfield being down all pro last year and not being able to play up to that level, I think really hurt the team. But they got to get after the quarterback. Day. It starts there. You look at the elite teams, you look at the teams who can win the biggest games, and you have absolute game records. The Chiefs, they got Chris Jones. Look at the Eagles. Look at the Rams. They got to the point last week, and they drafted Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, and those are 2 guys. And they replaced Aaron Donald. The Eagles got Jalen Carter. They've got other guys who can dominate up front. And the Buccaneers, other Vita Vea in the middle, right? But you got to get to the quarterback from the edge. So I think that's a huge need for them. And I think Jason Light will address that in the offseason. Got to find somebody who can get after the quarterback, whether it's a first-round pick, whether it's somebody in free agency, address the secondary. And as much as I think we all love Levante David and what he's been able to do for the franchise, and he's still a big-time leader on this team, they're getting older at that position, and they still need to be able to address the linebacking spot. But edge rusher, to me, is the primary area where they have to go out and get somebody. And obviously, Todd Bowles' defense has taken a little bit of a hit the past couple of years, and it's time for Todd to figure things out, and he's got to get the pieces, too, at the same time.
Rob, slide a little bit closer to the mic if you can, because I just lost you a little bit at the end, if you don't mind. There you go. Sorry, buddy, because I want to. You're giving me some gold nuggets here, man, and I love it. Tell me I'm crazy. I think the Bucs should make a move for Max Crosby, and I hate when people are like, trade for this guy, because it isn't fantasy football, right? But I feel like, and I watched him because I did have him on my fantasy team, and I watched him. I love watching great players on bad teams. Because, Rob, and you know this as well as anybody, you really see a lot. You see if these guys tap out. You see if these guys half-assed on any of these plays. This guy, even though everything is going wrong around him, is busting his ass on every single play. He's 27. I know how much he makes, but this is a guy, even when he's not getting to the quarterback, he's making plays on the defense. Even if it's not Max Crosby, and I know this usually isn't Jason Light's thing because he builds through the draft, but does he need to make that type of move to bring in a guy, whether it's a free agent or a trade, to help that defense? Because you're not going to be able to get a corner, get an inside linebacker, get a pass rush that can be a big-time contributor and a game wrecker in year one. I mean, we see it with Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr., but it doesn't happen like that. I mean, you had 2 anomalies in one season to help you win the Super Bowl. Does Jason Light need to make a move like that, a big move for an established star, to kind of help speed up that process when it comes to the development of defense?
Well, obviously, we've seen that the Buccaneers aren't afraid to make a big splash for an established star to come in and be the final piece, and that was Tom Brady in 2020. This would be a different scenario if you're going after someone like Max Crosby, who's not a free agent, and the assets that you're going to have to trade. It's happened in the NFL before. We saw Khalil Mack traded several years ago, right? And he went for a big package. You have to consider that as an option if you feel you can't get what you need in the draft. If they feel that they can get an edge in the draft, maybe then the trade isn't for a Max Crosby. Maybe the trade then is for somebody, some secondary help The Lions were able to go get from the Buccaneers Carlton Davis last year, and he helped solidify until they had all kinds of injuries there. I think there are players that are going to be potentially available. You look at Philly secondary; they've got an abundance of young talent. Darius Slay may be a guy who he's getting a little bit older, still playing at a high level. Might be a guy that you can get for cheap down the road in this offseason, or a little bit cheaper than some of these guys. I think there's a move, Jay, that has to be made that involves bringing in a player on another team through trade. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be a Max Crosby type player where you're giving up 2 or 3 top tier draft picks, whether it's a couple first rounders or a first and 2 seconds, or those assets are they're held like gold. They're so valued by NFL teams. So I'm with you when it comes to making a splash when you feel you're that close. They're close enough to where a guy like Max Crosby can impact this defense, assuming the offense can continue to play at the level they were or slightly better. They don't need to take major strides forward on offense. They need to on defense. I would think you explore that, or as they say, right, you kick the tires on everything. You kick the tires, you see what it takes, you see what and maybe somebody's disgruntled with a contract. Maybe he becomes a little more available for a lesser price. Some guys who might maybe potentially get franchised or not, they could become available. All of these got to be options. They all got to be on the table because the defense needs to be in order for them to compete. You're not trying to compete with the other teams in the NFC South. You've dominated and haven't dominated, but you've won a division for the last 4 years, and you've barely squeaked by winning it 3 times in the past 3 years. But you're competing with the other teams in the NFC because the goal is a Super Bowl. The goal is not winning the division title. The goal is not getting to the next round or the championship round. It's what do you have to do to be in the conversation with the teams that are hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. And that starts with fortifying the defense. And you got to find a way somehow to build that defense. Like the Rams formula, and they didn't even make it to the NFC Championship game. They were able to get 2 rookies to really impact that defense in verse and fist. And if those guys are available, they got to figure it out from the scouting department on down.
Who are you leaning towards in these championship games this weekend? Obviously, we know it seemed like we were destined for Eagles and Lions, and whether it was the Ravens or the Bills against the Chiefs, and Washington had other plans. But yeah, AFC, NFC, who are you leaning towards in those games?
Jay, I got a dilemma because I picked the Eagles to beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl as my preseason pick. So I've got 2 of the 4 teams for my preseason pick. They're right there. So I can't not take those teams right now because they're so close. But I feel like Washington has a real opportunity and Buffalo has a legitimate opportunity to go into Kansas City and win. It wouldn't surprise me if both visiting teams won these games. It wouldn't surprise me if it was a split and if it didn't go the way I had predicted way back in September. I have to make all my picks today on Wednesday. So I'm looking at the lines. I'm looking at the games. I'm probably I'm going to stick with what I predicted before the season. It's right there for me. So I'm going to take Eagles and Chiefs advancing. I'm pretty certain I'm going to take the Commanders to cover the 6 points. I think if the Eagles win, it's going to be a field goal game or less. And what should concern Philly is Jake Elliott hasn't been dominant for them or even close to it as a field goal kicker. And I think all Bucs fans know Zane Gonzalez was clutch in that game, in a wild card game, but he's also been inconsistent. And the line in Kansas City, it's against Buffalo, I think is only 2. If I can get it at 2.5, I might take Buffalo to cover in a 1-point game and try to hedge my bets. But I'm going to take the Eagles and the Chiefs just because I did it way back in August, early September. So I think that's the way I'm going to lean. Washington's got a real shot, though. They got a real shot. Jaden Daniels has been so impressive, and Jalen Hurts being banged up his knee. If his mobility is at all limited, that can impact the game because we know Saquon can go off for 200, but if you're putting 8, 9 men in a box to stop Saquon, it's going to be on Jalen to make some plays. And if Jalen can't move around the way he's used to, he's got the weapons. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, he's got the guys there. He just needs time to be able to hit them. They do have a dominant offensive line. The only team in football with 5 players on the offensive line who all received at least one All-Pro vote. That was the Eagles.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I'm with you. I look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, and I wonder, like, hey, those numbers were not great in the playoff game against the Rams with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Was that because Saquon ran for 200, or because he doesn't, because there's something off with Jalen Hurts. Just what there's a little bit of a hitch in his giddy up. He just doesn't look as spry to me. And, maybe because it was snow and the inclement weather. I know he's still working his way back from the concussion. But I just wonder if that's going to rear its ugly head against Washington. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about your baseball Hall of Fame ballot. I picked 4 guys yesterday on the podcast. I had CeCe, I had Ichiro, I had Billy Wagner, I had Omar Vizquel. I'm partial to Omar. I think he's the second best defensive shortstop behind Ozzie Smith. And I think that it can't just be all offense all the time. We have Devin Hester at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So that shows you like there's got to be different kind of parameters for guys making it in. I saw your ballot. Any surprises for you when you heard who got in last night?
I was surprised a little bit that Carlos Beltran wasn't able to finally get over that. What I don't like, Jay, is that Billy Wagner had to wait 10 years. He's in the Hall of Fame. So why didn't he make it on the first try?
Right.
Like, there are voters, and I appreciate being a voter. I love the process, and it's an honor and it's a privilege. But some guys look at players and go, well, he's not a first ballot. I'll vote him down the road. I vote for guys who I feel should belong in the Hall of Fame, and it doesn't matter if it's first ballot, second ballot, third ballot. And then you clog the ballot because they're still carried over. And, of course, we had all the guys like Alex Rodriguez, Hall of Famer. Let's just get him in there, get it over with. Manny Ramirez, Hall of Famer. Barry Bonds should have been in the Hall of Fame. Roger Clement, all these guys I voted for because I vote for the numbers. I look at it strictly based upon the numbers. We don't know who took what, when, how it impacted their game, their ability. The guys who took amphetamines in the 70s and 80s and whatever it was, it may have helped their hand-eye coordination. Maybe not necessarily that helps you hit a football, helps you hit a baseball a whole lot better than guys who are all jacked up. So I think we got to vote strictly on the numbers. CeCe gets in there. Why not Andy Pettitte? Andy Pettitte was a big game pitcher too. He's got the numbers and he's got those postseason numbers. So I think he should have got in. Chase Utley, his numbers compared to second baseman in the Hall of Fame are right there. And I don't have the stats as handy. Maybe here we go. If you got 1 second, I'll pull them up. But you look at Chase Utley compared to other guys in the Hall of Fame at that position, and I can't find them right now. When you need them, you don't have them. But they're like top 5 home runs and on base and slugging and all of that. You got to compare the guys at the position that they played. That's why Omar, he's got a legitimate right that he should be in the Hall of Fame. As you said, if not a top 2, top 3 defensive player of all time. And I think as my ballot allows, because there's a limit, you can only vote for 10. And I felt that there were 10 worthy candidates. Andrew Jones, I felt, is worthy for that same reason. That combination of speed, power, and defense. For a while there, Andrew Jones was absolutely the best center fielder in MLB. And then Jimmy Rollins at shortstop, I think he's probably, 7, 8, 18%, whatever it was. At shortstop, his combination of speed, power, defense compares with everyone. Like maybe compares right there with Barry Larkin, who's in the Hall of Fame. So there are some guys who certainly have absolute, legitimate, valid gripes for not getting in. It was good to see Billy Wags get in there because he was maybe one of the top 2 or 3 most dominant left-handed relief pitchers in the history of Major League Baseball. So he waited his 10. He got in. Ichiro, here's another one. Okay? So Ichiro misses 1 vote. He's not unanimous by 1 vote. How is that possible? Like that one guy doesn't vote. Like, did you really think you wanted to make Ichiro wait? You look at his numbers. He's not a Hall of Famer. You go back to, and I only mentioned Mike Schmidt because they did the documentary recently on MLB Network, and I realized that he missed by 17 votes unanimity. How is a guy like Mike Schmidt not a unanimous guy? So I love having the vote. I love being able to. Like I said, it's an honor and a privilege. But there's something with the system. There's too many guys who are able to vote. Like you got to look at it maybe closer to the NFL. The NFL has a smaller group of voters. I've talked to players who are in the Hall of Fame. Maybe they can have input, maybe a committee of 5 guys. Whatever it is, I think it needs to be tweaked at some point. But it's always cool to see. At least we have guys going in. When was it? 2 or 3 years ago? Nobody went in.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Ken Griffey Jr., how he wasn't a unanimous guy. I mean, hitting over 600 home runs. He was the face of baseball. I mean, Derek Jeter, when you only have a handful of guys that have ever walked planet Earth that have more hits than you, and you're the only one that was born after, 1940 or whatever like that, or after 1960, I think, because of Pete Rose. Yeah, it's kind of wild and certainly a process that needs to be adjusted. Rob, I feel a whole hell of a lot smarter for having you on the show today. I appreciate you so much. Rob Maaddi, follow him, Twitter/X AP Senior NFL Writer. Let's do it again, man. I appreciate it. Stay warm because it's freezing here in the Tampa Bay area.
Oh, man, it's crazy. Absolutely. Keep up the great work, Jay.
Thanks, pal. The one and only Rob Maaddi. That guy, a wealth of knowledge, a little bit of everything. And I know the audio was kind of going in and out there. Try to adjust it a little bit. Maybe in post-production we can work on it. But yeah, he's right. I mean, you look at the entire situation with the Buccaneers, and I'm glad that he agrees with me concerning the whole Liam Coen situation. It wasn't just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what Liam Coen has here. It's about what the hell's going on up there in Jacksonville. Not appealing. Not appealing at all. If you're a Jacksonville fan today, and we had Jamal St. Cyr on from up there, and I was going back and forth with him on Instagram yesterday, like, Liam Coen's allergic to cats. He doesn't want to go to Jacksonville. He is allergic to cats. He goes, they have medicine for that. I go, no, they only have medicine like that in Tampa. He goes, it's not too far. He's staying here. Liam Coen's staying with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you're just joining us, and Rick Stroud reported it looks like $4.5 million for him to stay in the Tampa Bay area. How badass is that? And you have to feel confident if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan today when you look at what this franchise was able to do to keep him here. And I really hope that other teams look at situations like this, and, the Tampa Bay Rays being one of them. The Buccaneers found a way to keep an assistant coach on their team by ponying up some more money and realizing that continuity is king. It's not just being resilient. It's not just about splashing money here and there and just opening up the checkbook for every Tom, Dick, or Harry that come across your organization. It's about keeping the good people here. These are the kind of moves that pay dividends years after Liam Coen is no longer with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's so many moves that franchises make, that organizations make, that are good faith moves. Now, you just don't make these decisions just purely on good faith, because you need to have some kind of production. You're not running a charity, you're running a business. But there's a lot of examples in sports where you can do both. You can do both. You can put your team in a position where they're going to be successful. You can pay the people that helped got you there, and also put your team in a position where they're going to continue to be successful. When you do things like the Buccaneers have done, and again, this is a franchise with Hugh Culverhouse and the way that they treated guys like Doug Williams. Just remember things like that. Awful. But now the Buccaneers are a franchise where they find a way. They find a way to make it happen. They find a way to keep their guys. And when you do that for one guy and two guys and 5 guys and 10 guys, you get guys that come back. You get guys that sign 1-year deals. Even on lower extent, and I mentioned this before, and I know it may not be a big deal to some, but just look at Ryan Neal. Ryan Neal was a starter for this Buccaneers team in 2023. They got rid of him. He came back. Guys don't come back to teams that they get let go. It just doesn't happen. But you see it on this Buccaneers team. Kayvon Merriweather coming back. Keenan Isaac coming back. I mean, it's just so smart for the Buccaneers to make these moves in good faith and to show people hey, we are a welcoming organization. We are a welcoming franchise. We're going to be upfront with you. We're going to be transparent with you. We're going to tell you the truth. And if you have better opportunities, hey, man, more power to you. Go do what you have to do. But if you have an opportunity to even take a step up in your profession, like Liam Coen, and go be a head coach, is only one of 32 of those jobs. You could be one of 32 men in this country that can lead a National Football League team, the most popular sport in this country. But if you have it not, and it's not just having the belief in yourself, but it's also understanding what the dynamic is in the place that you're at. As much as Ben Johnson had enough faith in him as a play caller to not take any jobs in the last offseason, part of the reason why he did that is because he looked at Detroit and went, I love working with Dan Campbell. I love working with Jared Goff. Look at me with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and arguably the best offensive line in football. Liam Coen looks at those same type of things. Look at how this organization has treated me. Look at the guys that I get to go to work with every day. There isn't a day that I saw Liam Coen on the practice field without a smile on his face, enjoying working with Baker Mayfield and these young players and trying to get the most out of them. Just think about it. These tight ends going into the season, I look at them and I think it's one of the more understated parts of this successful Buccaneers offense in 2024. To a man, everybody said they don't have one tight end on their roster outside of O'Keefe, who's kind of that hybrid H-back, fullback, tight end kind of guy. But when you look at Cade Otton, you look at Payne Durham, and you look at Devin Culp, none of those guys can block. We didn't hear any of that this season, did we? Who's going to block? They're just pass-catching guys. It's not what I saw this year. Part of the reason why they were so successful in the running game, is the running backs. Is the play caller. Is the offensive line. But the tight ends, I go back to one of the videos that I posted before the season with Liam Coen, with Cade Otton. And Cade Otton said, the fact that we came in last in rushing, like we wear that too. That pisses us off. We got to get better. And they did. And that could be the offensive line coaching and the assistant coaching, but it's also a guy like Liam Coen letting those guys know, like, hey, I'm going to call plays. There's going to be pre-snap motion. We're going to take a guy like Payne Durham, who many thought was just a pure pass catcher. We're going to swing him out, and he's going to crack some dudes right between the eyes with these big-time blocks. It's the adjustments that get made by these coaches that the players look at and go, I want to play for a guy like that. You also have the ability to do that, too. If you're a coordinator, that's what the best teams do. And you see that with all successful teams in all the 4 professional sports that we see here in America. The best managers, the best head coaches, they don't micromanage. They're not over there peeking over the shoulder. What's going on over there? You don't see Kevin Cash hanging out by the bullpen going, hey, Kyle Snyder, what's going on? Well, why are you doing this with Shane McClanahan? Well, why is Pepio throwing that pitch? You don't see that. You don't see Todd Bowles going over to Liam Coen going, it's an interesting play. You just don't get that. I know for a fact John Cooper doesn't do that. When they work on the power play, he's just like, oh, cool. We're mixing things up. Nice. There's certain things that elite coaches do when it comes to enabling the guys around them and empowering them. That bodes well, not just for the imminent kind of future of each team, but also when those guys tend to move on. They know that they're ready to go. And with Liam Coen being the number one story here in the Tampa Bay area today, that has to factor into the equation too. He's not staying in a place here in Tampa where he felt like he was being micromanaged. He wasn't in a place where it's like, all right, this guy's telling me I have to run the football because we know Todd's more a defensive type coach. He could stay here and be himself. Can't stress to you guys enough how important comfort is. And kind of going back to the conversation we were having before we had Rob Maaddi on with us, there's a comfort level that players and coaches and even front office members and even owners, like, you strive to be comfortable. That's why the majority of us that didn't grow up here moved to the Tampa Bay area, because we love it here. There's a comfort level. You're willing to sacrifice. Somebody like myself, where you're willing to sacrifice not being around your family, right? Because You love it here in the Tampa Bay area so much. So that is really what's important to me. And I think that's what is important to Liam Coen as well. All right, we're going to talk some baseball now. Double E, I see you on. I think I booked you at the wrong time. I got Erlendsson at 1:30 today. Marc Topkin at 1 o'clock today. Double E, I'm sorry, I love you, but it's baseball time, buddy. Baseball Hall of Fame. I think I messed up. E's on there too, but you're going to have to wait because it's baseball talk with Marc Topkin from the Tampa Bay Times. He just changed his whole schedule around to be with us. No, I just put in a little note to the sports director there at the time, so you can join us today. Mark, how are you, buddy?
Worked out good. Yeah, happy to be here, Jay. A lot of football talk. I heard you a little bit earlier, and then a little baseball now.
Yeah, man. And I just had Rob Maaddi on from the Associated Press with the Baseball Hall of Fame last night. Any surprises? I had 3 of the 4. I had the only guy that I had on that list that I usually don't or that didn't make it in was Omar Vizquel. I think he's the second best defensive shortstop behind a guy like Ozzie Smith. But yeah, 3 of the 4, I was spot on. What say you? Any surprises?
I mean, not really a surprise, more of a disappointment that somebody didn't think Ichiro Suzuki was worth putting in the Hall of Fame because that was such an obvious decision there. And there's one, he was one short of unanimous, and we may never know who that was. The Hall policy is you have to be a veteran member of the Baseball Writers Association to get to vote. The Hall gives you the option to opt in to have your ballots released. They do like a release of them about a week after the fact, but not everyone's required to. I'd like to see the BBWA try to enforce that stronger because I think, accountability and transparency for journalists is probably kind of a good thing. But anyway, if this person does not want to come out and admit who it was or, put themselves out on social media and doesn't opt to release their ballot, we won't know, just like we didn't know who the one person is who didn't vote for Derek Jeter and the 3 people who didn't vote for Ken Griffey Jr. Those are all pretty good ball players who should have probably been unanimous. Mariano Rivera obviously being the only one so far. So that's probably the only disappointment. I mean, I had 3 names on my ballot. Those were the 3 guys who got in. I've kind of become a small Hall guy in my grumpy old age. So, I was otherwise, fairly pleased. I mean, I've been on the Billy Wagner train since he's been on the ballot. I think relievers are underrepresented in the Hall. I think they're undervalued by the voters. And I know the big issue, or one of the big issues, was how many innings he pitched, compared to some of the starters. Well, obviously, but the other side to that argument is almost every inning he pitched was in a high leverage moment. So take that, over the stat that's been going around is over 900 innings pitched, the highest strikeout percentage of any pitcher ever, and the lowest batting average against of any pitcher ever with 900 innings pitched. That's pretty good if you're a pitcher to strike a lot of guys out and not give up a lot of hits. So I would take Billy Wagner. I'm glad he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been on the Billy Wagner train since the beginning. Top 10 closer of all time, left-handed guy that just threw absolute gas. You remember many years there with the Astros, part of a no-hitter. I know that's not the whole credential, but he's just a guy that if you're a closer, and you've seen this more than anybody, Mark, closers, it's like, wow, that guy was good for 2 or 3 years, right? This guy's good for 3 or 4 years. It's hard to be one of those guys that's constantly counted on at the end of the game for better part of a decade. And those guys should be rewarded. I wanted to go back to kind of what you said about Mariano Rivera. Somebody was asking me that last night of like, how do you vote unanimously for Mariano, but not for Jeter and not for Ichiro? Because, all right, maybe reliever is usually one of those things where people hold against you, right? Like you see with Billy Wagner. And I'm like, is it an American thing? Like Jeter's American? Like it was such a weird thing because you start going down the thing. Like, I don't know what the hell is it. The guy was a Metallica fan or something. He loved Enter Sandman. Like I still can't rationalize that Mariano got in unanimously and these guys have it, that these other guys didn't.
Yeah, I mean, look, the voting body changes every year. I don't know who the person was, obviously, in any of these cases, but maybe they weren't an eligible voter that year for the Rivera year. Maybe it's the same person who didn't vote for Jeter and didn't vote for Ichiro, and they actually are a big Mariano Rivera fan. Maybe it's totally 3 different, situations. It's just happenstance that it was one each time. But it's hard to think someone, you didn't accidentally return your ballot and forget to check the box
right
for Ichiro or forget to check the box for Jeter. So the one thing I hope, and this is probably me being the idealistic Mark here, but I hope it wasn't someone with just some petty grievance that, like Jeter blew him off in an interview. Ichiro didn't talk to him or her as the writer, something like that. And that at least whatever their reasoning was, that at least in their mind, there was some legitimacy to it. And it wasn't just, like I said, a petty thing.
Yeah, you got that
That
right,
makes us all look bad. If somebody blows you off for an interview, but they're a Hall of Fame player, that shouldn't, as a journalist, like that shouldn't impact your vote. And I would just like to think or hope that's not the case here.
Well, it's funny you say that, Mark, because I was sitting at the Buccaneers Falcons game a couple years ago with a longtime writer in the Bay Area, Ira Kaufman, and then D. Orlando Ledbetter from Atlanta. And we spoke about Terrell Owens. And Terrell Owens was a guy that, I mean, you look at his numbers, Mark, he's a top 5, top 10 receiver, no doubt about it. But the reason why he didn't get in until the third time was because he didn't have any writers vouch for him, no teammates vouch for him, no head coaches vouch for him. They just all they didn't really like the guy. And they almost looked at it as like they understood where writers came from. I said, I don't care. Like, I don't care how he treated anybody. The facts are the facts. The numbers are the numbers. Like, there's not many people that walk the earth that were able to do what Terrell Owens did. Is that different in baseball? How do you view something like that? How does the off the field, and I'm not talking about kind of like the steroids guys, but just how does that off the field and how they were viewed by their teammates, by the writers, by their coaches, how does that affect their candidacy?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jay, I think it'd be naive to say that doesn't have an impact. And I'm not trying to contradict myself, saying a guy a man or woman who didn't vote for a player that was obviously in for an isolated incident, they blew him off for an interview or something, that's wrong. Mm-hmm. But if a player in general, is a bad dude, is a bad character, doesn't treat people properly, that's going to impact some people's views. Now, we could have a separate discussion, is that right or wrong? But that's human nature. That's going to happen. And look, Curt Schilling kind of created a situation like that with the baseball hall. He basically told us to, F off. He didn't want to be in the hall. Don't vote for me. I don't care. And people didn't, and he dropped off the ballot. I mean, it just, that works that way sometimes. So I do think that. And then there's not a lot of guidance from the Hall of Fame on voting, but when you get your ballot every year, there's like 5 or 6 things that are kind of like the standards. And one of them is like, displayed, I forget the exact phrasing, but like displayed good character. So, yeah, I mean, if a person's an ass to everybody, whether it's teammates, media, the public, fans, I mean, that's going to factor in. And, I know the argument, it's a museum. It's not a church hall. It should be the best players, but this sport has been, that ideal has been blown apart by the steroid guys and the alleged steroid guys and the after the fact steroid guys. And there's been so much that's tarnished that idea that the Baseball Hall of Fame is for the best players. Look, I have a grandson now. You'll be in that boat someday. I mean, you're going to go there and you have a Hall of Fame without, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. That seems kind of weird, right? 2 of the best players ever of this era, but it looks like they're not going to get it. Alex Rodriguez is one of the best players this era. He's not going to get in, it looks like. So, I mean, these guys have created issues through their behavior. And I think that's whether it's, we talk about steroid thing or just overall behavior can sometimes impact that for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I remember when I went to the Hall of Fame, had to have been almost 12, 13 years ago. And the first thing I saw when I walked into the Hall of Fame was a large cardboard cutout of Pete Rose, the iconic Charlie Hustle sliding head first with his hair. And I'm like, is this real? Like, I thought somebody, like, I thought it was one of those things where it was like people protesting. But the first thing I saw when I walked in was Pete Rose. And I'm like, but his thing's not in the, like, his bust isn't in the back. Like, it's kind of weird, right? And when we talk about like these good dudes, like, don't look up what Ty Cobb has done in his life because you're not retroactively taking him out of the Hall of Fame either.
Yeah, I mean, Babe Ruth was not a nice person either. He was quite a character. But look, it's different times, it's different era, it's different standards, it's different reason, it's different accountability, it's different voting. People voting, different voting pools. So there's so much that's evolved in a way, and John Romano says this a lot too, but like, this is why baseball is such a great sport. This is why the Baseball Hall of Fame is probably the most discussed Hall of Fame, because of all the different characters, because of how the voting process works, because of some of the transparency. you mentioned Ira. I think he's been a Football Hall of Fame voter for like 150 years or something, right? He put Newt Rockne in, I think. But like, I don't think that's a very transparent process. These guys go into a room and they come out and they say who's in. It seems like they put 10 guys in every year. Like, there's different ways to do this. But I think the reason that there's so much discussion and debate over the Baseball Hall of Fame is exactly for all these reasons.
Yeah, Ira definitely predates the Super Bowl and the forward pass. So that's he's certainly
Color TV, right? He predates color TV.
Any TV at all. Any TV. He's the king of the fireside chat. I want to ask you about the Dodgers. I had Denard Span on yesterday because I see so many people, and a lot of them are former players that are like, yeah, they do what they got to do. And I'm just like, wait a second. Like, is this really good? Like, is this great for the game to defer all this money? Look at Shohei Ohtani's contract. It looks like a misprint. $2 million until he's 39, and then $68 million per until he's 48. Like, every single guy. They had the best domestic free agent in Blake Snell, international Sasaki. They're getting Kirby Yates. They got who else did they get? Tanner Scott. All these guys going back. It's weird because people look at, the Yankees did this, and but they weren't deferring money. They didn't have $500-600 million in deferred money this year like the Dodgers are going to have. What do you make of this offseason splash from the team that just won the World Series? And do you think this is quote unquote bad for baseball?
I mean, clearly they want to be the new evil empire, right? They're gonna replace the Yankees, the team everybody outside of their own fans is gonna root to lose, right. And them not winning the World Series next year or several times in the next few years will be a much bigger story than them winning it. Them not becoming a dynasty will be a much bigger story and probably greatly enjoyed by a lot more people than if they do. Look, the deferred money thing, I don't know. I mean, it's a unique situation. They're owned by like a financial firm, right? They're owned by Guggenheim, which is an investment firm that can move all these numbers around and do so in a way that maybe it doesn't come back to bite them. I mean, teams aren't owned by a lot of families anymore, right? It's not individual ownership. It's sometimes it's corporate. So the money part of it's changing. So I don't know. I mean, I think until you get, and if they ever get, which seems unlikely, to the salary cap, which would also include a salary floor, if that ever happens, if it doesn't, I don't know how you can like limit this or something. If you say a team can't defer money, I don't know if MLB has the right to say that. They get to pay them however they want to pay. If the players agree to it, they agree to it. You'd think that bill would come due at some point, right? I mean, you keep kicking that down the road. At some point, they're going to have to pay. The bigger question is, like I said, and there is a new labor contract coming up after the 26th season. There's already a lot of people thinking there'll be a long lockout. And, I've even seen a couple articles saying that maybe this is the year that the owners try to go to the mat and try to get the salary cap and the salary floor tied in there somehow. And if it costs them a season, it costs them a season. And, obviously as people who are baseball fans, people whose jobs have to do with covering baseball, you don't want to see a season lost to labor issues. But, the sport probably is headed towards some type of moment of clarity here. Like which way is it going to go on that? Because the disparity is getting bigger and bigger between the highest payroll. I think, what did we see the other day? The Dodgers are up over 380 now. And I think the Rays and Marlins together are like 125 maybe right now. I mean, and then the A's have actually spent a little bit more, so they're up there a little bit. But to have some teams at 60 and some teams at 380 seems a little bit off.
Yeah, just I think when you look at the entire process, that you said clarity, I look for a day of reckoning, unfortunately, right? Because it's one thing when you have a team that spends like the Yankees did in 2009, and they go, I'm going to get Sabathia, Teixeira, and Burnett, right? And then the next couple of years after they won the World Series, they kind of like trailed off and they didn't spend, and there was other teams. And when you're going back-to-back postseasons of Shohei Ohtani winning the World Series and then continuing to roll that ball down the hill, what's going to stop them? And I think we're getting closer to some of these teams, and I worry about more. I worry maybe a little bit less of the competitive balance, Mark. I'm worried more about the fans. I grew up watching this game and loving this game. It's in my blood. My dad was a coach. My grandfather was a coach. I know how much you love this sport. And I worry because they're doing so much to get more people invested. They're trying to speed these games up. But at the end of the day, if more and more teams are kind of like with the Rays, where you're struggling on really resonating with the players because you don't know if they're going to be there in 2 years. I mean, people aren't going to tune in. People aren't going to tune in on a Wednesday night to watch the Pirates and the Reds, right? Because they know in 2 years, Paul Skeens and Ellie De La Cruz, they're probably going to play for another team. So do you see kind of where I'm coming at with that, with as far as like the interest to the regular season product is going to take a hit with this as well? Do you agree with that?
I mean, I see your point. I don't know if I totally agree. I mean, I think there's an onus on those teams to find a way to build their fan base. You know, if it's not built around, you know, that one star player who you know you're going to keep, then you have to build it around, as we see sometimes do. You build it around the future, you build it around a group of new kids. You maybe come up with some catchy marketing campaign. You appeal more to your fans through price, you know, and find ways to get them to the ballpark. We've seen teams do other entertainment, concerts. I mean, there's different ways to overcome that. I understand what you're saying, but I think there's also, like, as much as having that super team drives this, you know, kind of separates these things, I also think you can see where there'll be fans tuning in who want to just see the Dodgers lose, who want to see the Dodgers get their butts kicked. You know, they become enemy number one. Like I said, you know, the evil empire, like the Yankees used to be the most hated team. And, you know, look, the Dodgers play down here. I think that's going to be a fascinating series, you know, to see Shohei Ohtani and that group of all-stars playing, you know, at a spring training stadium, playing at Steinbrenner Field. The intimacy of that stadium, as close as you're going to get, it's going to be a really interesting, like, dynamic. That's, you know, that's the superstar team, right? That's the Lakers of the glory days, and, you know, the old Dallas Cowboys. That's the team where every player is pretty much a star, and, you know, they're kind of going to become like a traveling roadshow now, and they'll be loved by their fans, but I think they'll be booed by a lot of people too. So that, you know, maybe that offsets some of what you're saying, but yeah, a Tuesday night Reds Pirates game or a Rays Marlins game, whatever you want to pick, where there's not a lot of star players, you know, it does need some ways to draw appeal, and you are going to have that. But I don't think until you get to salary cap, salary floor, that you can legislate that any other way.
I know this race season coming upon us is going to be probably one of the more unique seasons in your career. I mean, it's that's the understatement.
Hey, way to go out and live there, buddy.
It's crazy, man. Like,
hey, know what? I think Liam Coen's going to come back. You know what? I'm going to go out and live.
I mean, and listen, if we're talking the stadium, that's just like another conversation. And your colleague at Tampa Bay Times, Colleen Wright, has done such a great job with that. And it seems like no new news for there. So I'm not going to ask you about that, because we know that everything kind of has to be decided by March 31st when it comes to the future of Tropicana Field itself, to see where this team is going to be playing beyond 2025 until that new stadium is built. There's so many more questions than answers. I heard the news, obviously, about Taylor Walls. They settle he's going to be back with the team, but any other moves do you think that the Buccaneers, I got football in the mind, the Rays are going to make, especially with the bats, right? Because there's still got to be uncertainty, right? Does that affect, like, the uncertainty of their future, where they're going to play? Is that directly going to affect how they're going to assess this roster, especially with inquiring about bats to help this pretty strong pitching and starting rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no. I mean, obviously, if they want to make a trade, the guy they're trading for doesn't have any control over that he's coming here, right? I mean, if they were in the market where they were trying to sign some free agents to long-term deals, I do think that's an issue. That is a legitimate issue. A guy who has a chance to sign a 3 or 4 year contract, and, you know, or 5 or 6 year contract with Santander, just get 5 years with a 6-year option, maybe with Toronto, and, you know, Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, there are some legitimate guys out there, but yeah, that's probably a tough sell if you're the Rays and you sit there and you say, not only are we not going to be able to give you the most amount of money, we're not going to win the bidding. We also, you know, don't know. We think we're going to try and be back in the Trop in 26 and 27 and maybe probably 28, but we're not sure if we'll be there in all of 26 or not, when it's going to be done. And we don't really know yet what's going to happen with beyond that, if we're going to get this new stadium or not in St. Pete. Yeah, that's a lot of uncertainty to ask a premium player. So that's, I think, a factor. And I know this story generated a lot of interesting comments, but I will stand by what I wrote a couple weeks ago or last week, that, you know, the Rays would have been in the Sasaki bidding. I'm not saying they would have gotten him, but they, I think, would have gotten certainly past the first round, maybe even, you know, toward the finalist round. But that was a legitimate issue. Like, there's a guy, you're getting him for 6 years, to not be able to tell him where you're going to play. And a guy that, you know, kind of came to this reputation of wanting things kind of on the low key, you know, not a lot of hassles. like not knowing where you're going to be and maybe having to move around for a couple of years, I think that would be a legitimate thing. So I think that was a factor with that. But otherwise, unless they're going for a big time multi-year free agents, I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, Danny Jansen knew what he was signing on for.
Right.
I've talked to him. I heard him do a foul territory interview the other day. I mean, he knew exactly what he was getting into. So I don't think it's a big issue in terms of the kind of players that they're going for. I do think it's something that's going to be a conversation. We're going to bring it up, obviously, as media, where it's going to be a lot of subject conversation. And it's going to come up as they go around the country, as visiting teams come in. Obviously, the 2 visits the Yankees make, where they're the visiting team at Steinbrenner Field, is going to be a big deal. And so it's going to be a topic of conversation. Do I think it's going to distract the current group of players in there? I don't know. I mean, there'll be some bitching and moaning, especially if there's some rainouts early or rain delays. But I think Kevin Cash and Eric Neander have already kind of planted the seed to get out ahead of that and try to use this as a galvanizing thing to help the team in that regard. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue from that standpoint. Now whether there's a lot of rain delays and games that don't get finished that have to be made up, that could be a big issue from a competitive standpoint. But I don't think, like, conversationally, it's going to be a big issue. As far as improving the team, I mean, they haven't done a lot. Absolutely agree. They are banking on a lot of things happening and going the right way to get better based on guys who weren't good last year or will get more opportunity this year.
Marc Topkin doing a great job, as always, from the Tampa Bay Times. Got the article up there about the raised ticket price and Taylor Walls. And I've been telling everybody that would listen, make sure you guys subscribe, do whatever you can to support local media and especially the Tampa Bay Times. Mark, you do such a great job. I'm so appreciative of your time. And guess what? Liam Coen, just because you put it out there in the atmosphere, he is returning as the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's not a one-trick pony, baby. He does football too. Mark, I appreciate it, man. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
All right, Jay, anytime.
All right, buddy. Good stuff there. Marc Topkin from the Tampa Bay Times. Good stuff, man. Good stuff there. And I can't wait. It's the most unique baseball season ahead for our Tampa Bay Rays. And I implore you to go out there to Steinbrenner Field and support them. I'll be out there. I cannot wait. All right, let's bring him in. I boned it. I screwed up. I messed up. Eric joins us every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. For some reason, I had Ed Encina's Thursday time, 1:30 in my brain. And I was like, it's funny. Before the show today, I was just chilling. I was like, man, I got everything. The Liam Coen situation, we're good. I got nothing to worry about. And then at 12:59, I saw your face and I go, the one thing that I didn't do is double check the times. It's just the way it goes, man. So I apologize for that, my friend.
No worries. It's a good thing I like you, Jay. Let's just say that.
You like me a lot more than the Lightning like playing north of the border. Holy shit, what's going on? You watch these games and the Tampa Bay findaways. I heard a lot of people on social media last night like, what happened to the Tampa Bay findaways? What is up with it? Is it just divisionally? Because it just seems like in years past, and maybe we're jaded because of the run that they had during the Stanley Cup years, they always found a way to win. They always found a way to get the 2 points. And it just seems like there's so many games now this year and last year where they get, it's 2-2 and they give up a goal with 2 minutes left. And then, they didn't give up the empty netter last night, but then they give up an empty netter and you're like, what the hell happened? Like, it was another chapter in that book last night.
Let me tell you, they're finding a way just not to win games. They're finding ways to lose games. And I think the thing that has to be bothersome, we can point out that probably 99 out of 100 times the Lightning win that game last night in Montreal, especially the way they came out in the third period. They came out in the third period to win a game, and that's the attitude you like to see. Sure, they blew the 2-0 lead in the second period. That happened. San Jose lost a 5-1 lead last night to Nashville and lost the game 7-5. I know it's San Jose, but it happens in this league.
Montreal, didn't they blow a 3-0 lead to
Yeah, they
Toronto?
were up 3-0 on Toronto and gave up 7 straight. They lost 7-3. So these things happen in the NHL. There's good players on the other team, and they want to win the game as well. And that was a key game for Montreal. They're trying to climb up the standings, and the Lightning were a team that's in front of them. So they had some emphasis on that game, and the Lightning were the better team in terms of the way the game was played. So you can say that Sam Montembeault stole that game from Montreal, and you would be correct because in the third period, he was tremendous. But I think what has to be bothersome is the way in which the Lightning gave up the game-winning goal. It's an offensive zone draw. That's where the play starts. And it should have been a nothing play. Like it should never have resulted in the game-winning goal. And then you look at, like, if people go to my website, I've got 3 freeze frame pictures from the game last night, and where 4 Tampa Bay players are at and where Jake Evans is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
4 guys are basically on the same sort of sliver of the ice, not necessarily in a line, but they're all within basically the same 7 to 8 foot area watching the puck. They're not looking at Jake Evans behind them, and they give up a wide open one-timer opportunity, and that's happened too much. Monday's game in Toronto was the same situation. The goal that Matthew Nye scored with 20 seconds to go in the second period that turned a 2-1 deficit into a 3-1 deficit. 5 guys are watching the puck, and nobody's watching Matthew Nye skate right past them down in the lower area where Mitch Marner finds him. That has to be the thing that's concerning. So we can talk about offense and the lack of scoring, and sure, if they'd have scored early in the third period, we're not talking about this in the way that we are. But the fact is, when you're not scoring and if things aren't going for you offensively in a game like that, you got to be better defensively. And that goal last night, hopefully that's a tipping point to kind of turn things around, because it's happened too often this year that there's too much puck watching. There's too much of players in one area of the ice and not paying attention to the danger. I mean, I do the post-game show with Chief, and, we talk about it all the time.
Oh, yeah,
the most dangerous player is not usually the guy with the puck. It's coming from somewhere else. And if you can't recognize that, all it takes is a simple head check. Jay, I used this analogy with Chief on the show last night. Watch Lionel Messi on the pitch. Mm-hmm. His head is always moving, always constant, back and forth. What's going on? What's going on around me? Who's near me? What can I do if I get the ball here? Where's the danger coming from defensively? That's all it takes. That's all it takes. And they continue to just kind of find ways to just get mesmerized by the puck. And it's costing them games. They would be a lot closer to the top of the Atlantic Division if they were pulling points out of games like last night. And too many times they've given them away this year because of just mental defensive lapses.
Yeah, it's funny because you actually see Nikita Kucherov do that before he passes the puck. He scans the scene, he kind of looks around, he surveys everything, and then when he gets the puck, he doesn't even have to look where he's passing the puck to. Is that a individual thing? Is that on the players, or is that on the structure of the team as a whole? Because I don't know, I sit next to Chief in the press box, and he's always like, look at the puck in the corner. Nobody's by that guy. Nobody's by that guy. Nobody's by that guy. And I think if you're doing this time and time again, like, I don't know if it's just the players saying, I mean, these are professional athletes. Like, you don't get to, like it's got to be something that the structure's got to change a little bit then too, right? Because I don't want to say they're coached to ignore guys, but it just seems like there's pucks in the corner. And I remember growing up, if I was the off defenseman or I was the off winger and the puck was in, like, let's say the left corner, if I'm the right D, I'm like, all right, I'm close to you, but I'm not leaving the front of the net. But for this team, it seems like everybody goes to the puck and then they adjust to when the puck comes out of there, and it's biting them in the ass.
Not to sound political here,
mm-hmm.
I think it's both.
Okay.
It's obvious when you see that many guys trying to surround the puck, that they're taught to do that. But that doesn't preclude you from being aware of what's around you, because the other guy that you're probably trying to get the puck away from, he's a National Hockey League player too.
Right.
There's a chance he can make a play.
There is.
Right?
And
if he makes a play, there's somebody wide open, because you've got all 5 guys too close to the puck in a surrounding area, and you're leaving your goalie out to dry. So I think part of the system is surround the puck. And then, but also the players still have to be aware that you can't tell me the coaches are saying, just look at the puck. I mean, the play, again, I referenced it, the Nice goal at the end of the second period on Monday. 5 guys, probably within a 6-foot square radius, their heads are all focused on one area. Why do you need 5 guys focused on just the puck? Right? You can't tell me that the heads have to be there. Okay, fine, you're trying to surround the puck. If you're taught that, that's the way the coaches want them to do it. But you can't tell me they're all of them are told, everybody look at the puck and try and win it back. Don't worry about the guy skating behind you all alone in front of your goaltender.
Yeah, I just think it's really ironic that, and it seems like by that rationale, that the idea is if you outnumber the guys in the corner, let's say, if you have more sticks in there, more guys in there, you have more of a chance to come out with the puck, right? I get that if that's what the rationale is. But we see elite players in this league. The Lightning have a couple of them where they go 1-on-3 and they come out with the puck. Hell, that's one of the great things I think Jake Gensel does, the puck retrieval, right? Alex Gorin did a great job with that, where, he would go in the corner and come out against two defensemen. Because if that's the case, when you're winning 1-on-2, you got to figure you're 4-on-3 on the rest of the ice. So I just worry about that lack of adjustment when it comes to the Lightning defense, because when you look at their goal differential and you look at their offense, I don't care. You got to be able to win games 2-1. And the defensive last night, and I know people, and I want to ask you about this guy, people are crushing a guy like Emil Lilleberg. And I think on that last goal too, he was way too soft on the puck carrier. So some big hits last night from Max Crozier. Darren Radish had one, but man, the defensemen themselves, they got to play better too.
Well, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's usually the Lilleberg-Perbix pair that ends up being on the ice for these situations. Not always, but they seem to be. And again, that was the case last night on the game-winning goal, where Lilleberg steps up at the red line trying to pinch off the play, and then the puck kind of squirts free right inside the blue line, and the only guy who could locate it was Joel Armida. But Nick Perbix, seeing that, decides that he needs to move over towards the boards as well. Like, why is he floating over the boards? If he stays more centralized, there's a good chance that pass doesn't get through.
Right.
And even if it does, he's there to challenge it in some capacity, get a stick on it. Maybe he's got a body in front, not give Evans a clean look on a one-timer situation from the high slot. So, you have to be harder on the puck. You have to be aware of what your defensive partner's doing. Again, just because I'm so mesmerized by how bad the Nyes goal was the other night, Ryan McDonough floats across to try and disrupt the play on Austin Matthews right as he hits the blue line. Now all of a sudden he can't get there. He doesn't disrupt the play, and he's put his defensive partner out of position, which was Darren Radish at that time, late in the period. So Radish doesn't read that and come underneath of him and support that other side of the ice. I mean, those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. It's just awareness of the situation. And what has to be maddening is these are correctable situations. At least they should be, right? They should be easily correctable. Now, having said all that, I don't know how many practice days the team has had this month, and it's not necessarily an excuse, but sometimes you need to be on the ice in a practice situation, not a morning skate on the day of a game, but in a practice to kind of reset some of the habits, right? And I think I counted it up. We've referenced how difficult this stretch is. The two games coming up this weekend are going to be 16 games on 29 days for Tampa Bay. They'll practice tomorrow. They've had 2 full days off at home without having to have travel or a game or be on the road. So 2 days, good friend Tom Jones used to say, a day off for me is when I wake up in my own bed and I go to sleep in my own bed and I don't do anything in between. That's a day off, not getting off a plane at 2:00 in the afternoon or anything like that. So the Lightning have only had 2 of those days at home. It's different when you're on the road, you're in a hotel. Sure, you're not at the rink, you're not thinking about the game, but you're not with your family. You're with your hockey family, but you're not with your family. And I think that factors into some mental breakdowns, and they need a mental reset. So hopefully this practice coming up tomorrow before they face the Blackhawks on Friday kind of gets that reset, because as I always say, if us schmucks can recognize what's going on, the coach, the coaches know what's going on.
What'd you think about Eyssimont playing with Gensel and Point?
He's a spark plug.
Yeah.
Right. He's not a 20-goal scorer, but he's a spark plug. He's a forecheck.
Might be if you play with those guys for 80 games, he might score 20 goals.
I thought he looked okay in that spot.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously,
he can keep up with them speed wise.
He can skate.
Yeah.
And obviously he set up the play for Gensel's goal that made it 2-0 as he took it around and do a wraparound. He had a similar play in the third period that Jake just had to corral the puck before he could get it on net and allow Montembeault to kind of get in position, and Jake couldn't finish off that play. He's the one thing we've said about Eyssimont here probably in the last month or so is you notice him, right? He's in on the forecheck. He's being the agitator that he can be because he can get under the skin of the opponents. Everybody wants to kill Mikey Eyssimont. Sometimes I don't understand why, but so he must be doing something on the ice and saying stuff out on the ice to kind of get under guys' skin. But he showed that he can when he's, if he has to pinch in an elevated role, that he can fill in that role. I don't know if he's a permanent solution to that. I still think, as we've talked about, a middle six forward, if we're talking trade deadline situations, is somewhere the Lightning need to address because you can see it. They keep rotating that sixth winger, that sixth forward in the top six. Lots of guys have had opportunities and looks there. So they need to solve that issue. And at least for one night, Mikey Eyssimont was the answer.
Yeah, and the big question we've had over the last couple of days is the decision that John Cooper made by not having Andrei Vasilevsky going up against Toronto and playing him against Montreal. We may not always know the method to the madness. I know we've had this conversation in the past where Coop usually likes to play Vasi against the weaker team, right? Usually the team with the lower
Depends on the
standings,
schedule,
but it depends on the schedule. How long in advance do they make that decision that Vasi's playing against Montreal against Toronto, then rather than Toronto?
I'm sure they would have made it on the plane up to Toronto Sunday. That's probably when they made that decision. And, Vasi's had a couple of rough starts against the Leafs this year. Johansson was going to get one of the games. And sometimes the prevailing thought in hockey is you use your number one against the, whether you want to say the perceived weaker team or the team you feel you need to have the points more against. And I think that probably factored into this decision as well. Curious to see how it goes this weekend because You've got Chicago on Friday and then you end the trip with another divisional game in Detroit, another team that's trying to push from behind, who gets to start in what situations there.
What do you think?
My guess is Johansson goes Friday and Vasi goes on Saturday because it's a Western Conference opponent versus an Eastern Conference opponent and divisional game, all that stuff that factors into it. And then we're going to get kind of back to a somewhat normal schedule for the team as they'll start playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday situations, leading up until the Four Nations break. But yeah, it is always curious how coaching staffs tap into these decisions. Usually the backup, quote unquote, gets the second half and you hope he can steal it. But I think the opponent matters. And I think that the circumstances matter. And if I had no problem with Johansson going in there, he's played well. Really, since his first couple of starts were kind of a little shaky. He's kind of stabilized. I thought he was pretty good against Toronto, even though he let in the four. I thought that he did his job to give his team a chance to be in that game. Defense let him down. And I thought Vasi, I didn't like the Slavkovsky goal last night. He's not square. He doesn't seal the post. That's not a goal.
Yeah.
We usually let and kind of gave Montreal some momentum because they surged after that and got the tying goal before the Lightning kind of settled themselves down. But I thought he was fine. He made some of the stops he was supposed to and, gave his team a chance to win. And again, like I said, 99 out of 100 times, we're not talking about that defensive lapse, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this is a kind of a little bit of a slap in reality to you can't get frustrated if pucks are not going in for you because the one thing you can control is how hard you play, and that includes on defense. And as hard as they played on offense, I don't think they played well enough on defense to get a result they probably deserved.
What did you think about the play of Max Crozier over the last couple of games? And when Chernak is coming back, where do you see the future of those right-handed shot defensemen? Because I don't think Chernak's going anywhere, but it's got to come down to Crozier, Radish, Perbix. They like Radish. You see him chipping in offensively too with a couple of absolute laser beams. Where does Max Crozier fit into this? Because I think he plays a little bit of a heavier game. I feel like Lilleberg will probably play a little bit better with him there. What do you see as far as his future, Nick Perbix, and those right-handed shot defensemen?
Well, they like Crozier. There's no doubt. I think. Now, he missed some time in Syracuse this year with injury, but I think him spending most of the year in Syracuse has been a business related decision. I don't think it's been personnel. And, meritocracy is supposed to rule the day, but sometimes business side trumps it because, they're trying to save as much salary cap space as possible.
Right.
They're trying to create space that they really haven't had the past couple of years because they've been in LTI, and LTI is a very convoluted, difficult situation for teams to kind of have to work their way through. And they're trying to stay away from that this year. So by keeping just the 7 defensemen all year and just the 1 extra forward, and even with Moser being out, they have not called up another defenseman to even have a 7th guy around because they're trying to utilize the opportunity to create cap space. Having said that, watching Crozier these last 3 games, you keep asking yourself, why is this guy not in the lineup on a regular basis? Because it's still a small sample size, but you've liked the sample that you've seen, going back to the tail end of last year and, his brief appearance in the playoffs. He didn't start that series against Florida. Maybe he should have. I don't know if it would have made a difference, but maybe he should have based on the way he played. So when Cernak gets back, we'll see. I would have to think I know you've only got about 7 or so games once the team gets back from this trip before the 4 Nations break, that they don't give him a longer look to be a guy that can, because he plays very well with Emil Lilleberg. He plays, they've got such good chemistry. It's going back to last year in Syracuse. And even when they came up, when Crozier came up last year and played, it was primarily with Lilleberg, and they were a pretty good bottom pairing because it has been the bottom pairing that's hurt this team this year. Like I just mentioned, it seems like most of the situations that end up in bad results tend to be with the bottom pairing on the ice. So I would like to see Crozier get a longer look, sit Nick Perbix, and give Crozier a look along with Lilleberg once Cernak gets back, because I like the top 4, not crazy about the bottom pair, and that has to improve. And if Crozier can improve it, I think you have to do it.
Yeah, and I wonder how that would go, like when Moser comes back, right? Hedman, Moser, McDonough, Cernak, and then you kind of have, 4 guys for 2 spots, right?
Or you go 11-7, which they've done a few times this year, which easily they could do because, Radish is on the number 1 power play right now.
Yeah, you're not taking him out, so he's one of those guys. Yeah,
right. It's a good question. It's a dilemma that you like to have.
Especially because you need another forward too, so you can rotate Kucherov or keeping that guy fresh, especially on the road. That helps keep him away from the big matchups. Yeah, 11-7 until you make a move. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But we're definitely going to talk about that as the year goes on. The one and only Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. That's Erik_Erlendsson on Twitter/X. It's a K, not a C. 2 S's after the D. Use that promo code JNZ. Sign up for lightninginsider.com today. Get $10 off, not just this season, but every recurring season after that. And we'll go from there. Next Wednesday, 1 p.m., Erik will be joining us, and I will not make that mistake again. Yeah. Sorry about that, my friend. Thank you again.
Hey. No worries. Normally, I would have seen it, but days after losses, I usually try and stay away from my Twitter comments and mentions because it's a toxic environment. So I didn't catch it in my Twitter feed.
Oh, that's right. I did put it on my Twitter, so it's your fault then.
No. I absolve myself from any responsibility here.
I 25% absolve myself from blame too. Thanks, brother. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, bud. Be well.
All right, man. Good stuff there. Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. Some breaking news now when it comes to the NFL. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. The Ian Rappaport just put out that the Las Vegas Raiders are expected to hire Bucs assistant general manager John Spytek as their new general manager. And this is from Ian. A top lieutenant for GM Jason Light, Spytek is respected for helping build the Buccaneers, including when they won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady, a minority owner with the Las Vegas Raiders. So, again, we've talked a lot of Buccaneers today. And, for those of you just coming back and joining us, Liam Coen, the big story of the day. The Buccaneers keeping him $4.5 million, it looks like, and that's what Rick Stroud reported. Excuse me. So some good news there. Good news that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers keeping a guy like Liam Coen here keeping him here in the Bay to work with Baker Mayfield and Bucky Irving and the rest of the guys on the offensive side of the ball. And one of the things I mentioned earlier on today here on the podcast was, yeah, you're back. And not only are you back, Liam Coen, but everybody else is here too. Well, by the end of the day, it's a little different. It's a little different now because John Spytek looks like he's leaving the Buccaneers. He's heading out west to Sin City to be the general manager for the Las Vegas Raiders. And it makes sense. I think a lot of Buccaneers fans, you went into this offseason realizing that there was going to be changes and there were going to be guys leaving, whether it was on the player side, whether it's on the coach's side, whether it's going to be on the front office side. The great news that we got right around 10:30, 10:45 today, that Liam Coen is not leaving. He's not taking that job with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's going to stay as the offensive coordinator of your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is great. Which is great as far as the continuity of this offense, building on what we saw last year. I'm excited to see what the future holds there. Also, we're seeing that the Jets have a deal for Aaron Glenn to be their new head coach. Sources say as the former Jets first rounder lands with his old team. We got to try to get our guy Jake Asman on the program tomorrow. Talking about this now. Posting this on Twitter. This is what happens when you're a one-man band. You got to be able to do this online so everybody knows what you're talking about. So Aaron Glenn leaves the Detroit Lions as their defensive coordinator. He is now the new head coach of the New York Jets. No surprise there. We knew there was going to be changes in the offseason, and we knew especially there was going to be changes for the Detroit Lions. We saw there was issues with the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of years ago when they lost Shane Steichen, when they lost Jonathan Gannon from their Super Bowl team. And I say Super Bowl because they got there. They didn't win it. And then there were some real issues last year with the team. And then this year, they're right back in it because what did they do? They went out and they got Kellen Moore to be their offensive coordinator, and they got Vic Fangio to be their defensive coordinator. And Vic Fangio making $4.5 million a year, one of the more reputable assistants in the game, and he got paid as such. And Liam Coen has that same now salary. It looks like $4.8 million. But when you see a guy like Aaron Glenn go home, and we're going to talk about this with our guy Ian Beckles and Recher podcast at 3 p.m. today. You don't want to miss that. As soon as our podcast is over here, I'm hightailing it right to the Dignitary Tea in Kava House, 4817 Southwest Shore Boulevard. He was around his buddy Aaron Glenn when he was up there with the Jets trying to make the team. Aaron Glenn is a leader of men, that defense that was just ravaged by injuries this year. He had those guys playing, man. He had them balling. Unfortunately for them, they came up a little bit too short, but you can't fault the effort that he put in these last couple of years with Detroit. We remember him also from his time there in New Orleans. A big fan of Aaron Glenn is former Saints head coach Sean Payton. So when you look at the future of the Detroit Lions, you now have to replace the offensive coordinator with Ben Johnson going to the Chicago Bears, and now the defensive coordinator with Aaron Glenn, now the head football coach of the New York Jets. So all of these dominoes are starting to fall. These new coaches are now being put into place. The Jaguars are still looking for their leading man. Is it going to be a guy like Patrick Graham? Is it going to be a guy like Robert Saleh, who was the coach of the New York Jets last year? We don't know. But what we do know is that Liam Coen will not be that guy because he is staying with the Buccaneers offensive coordinator position, probably his last year as the Bucs OC, because there's going to be jobs opening up next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if Liam Coen is at the top of the list of those teams that are going to be searching for a new HC. But John Spytek leaving definitely hurts. Definitely hurts. You're talking about a guy that has been part of that conglomerate of Jason Light and his front office members that they just find a way. They find a way. There's a continuity there with those guys. And that's part of the reason why this team has been so successful over the years. He is going to be sorely missed, especially with those guys, because you know how tight-knit of a group they were and how much love that Jason Light had for John Spytek. And we were expecting Greenberg going to the Jets, right? They went in a different direction as well. So the fact that Greenberg is staying good, Cohen staying good, Todd Bowles staying good. But unfortunately, John Spytek going to the Las Vegas Raiders. And there's no surprise because you have the link there with Tom Brady and Spytek. His career, like this guy is a football lifer. He started out as an operations intern with the Detroit Lions back in 2004. Eagles intern in 2005. Then he was working in the scouting department with the Eagles from 2006 to 2009. Director of college scouting with the Browns from 2010 to 2012. A scout with the Broncos from 2013 to 2015. That's when he came over with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was the director of player personnel from 2016 to 2020, vice president of player personnel for the 2 years after that. And then for the last couple of years, an assistant general manager with the Buccaneers, working alongside Jason Light, Mike Greenberg, and the entire crew over there. So he goes to Las Vegas, and they need a lot. They need a lot. And the biggest decision they have to make is what they're going to do at the quarterback spot. They draft number 5, excuse me. They have the number 5 overall pick coming up in the NFL draft. So what moves do they make to try to fortify their team? Because they're in a spot where they don't have a ton of talent. And they're in arguably one of the toughest divisions in all of football with 3 playoff teams, obviously the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Broncos. So where do they start? They got to get the quarterback right. They got to get the head coach right. And I think it's a smart move for Mark Davis and the Raiders to make sure that it seems weird how some of these teams are going backwards. They're like, let's get the head coach and then get the GM, and they don't worry about the order. The GM should be part of the process. The GM is the guy that's going to be putting this team together. So you bring Spytek in. He's got the experience of building a winner, experience of working with Tom Brady. And now they can start, all right, what can we do to get a head coach? What can we do to bring a guy in here that can get this team back to being competitive? I find it interesting that this is the order that the news came out. What if it was the opposite? Because if John Spytek went and was named the GM to the Raiders this morning, and we didn't get that news about Liam Coen, there would have been a lot of people here in the Tampa Bay area very worried about, oh my gosh, we were worried about the Jaguars. Maybe we should be worrying about the Raiders. But the fact that Liam Coen is staying here and it looks like he got that big contract, the Raiders will probably look in a different direction. I don't know. A lot of great things, a lot of things to certainly keep an eye on. And that's why a lot of people believe that the NFL season is the best season in sports. And then the second season right after that, the NFL offseason, because of all of the crazy moves, because of the draft. There's just so much movement. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. All right, that's going to wrap it up for me. I'm going to end a couple of minutes early today so I can get out of here and I can get over to the Dignitary Tea and Coffee House and get ready for our podcast today at 3 p.m. It's the Beckles and Recher podcast. We're going to talk Liam Coen. We're going to talk College Football National Championship. We're going to talk a couple other things as well. You don't want to miss that. Follow us on all social media at Ian Beckles, at Jay Recher. A big thank you to everybody that joined in on the show today. We had joining us at 12:30, Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press. Great job there. Marc Topkin from the Tampa Bay Times. Erik Erlendsson from LightningInsider.com. We'll have more guests joining us on the program tomorrow. We know Ed Encina will join us at 1:30. Follow me on all social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. Like and subscribe. Trying to get those subscribers over 1,000. Thank you to all of you that have liked and loved and supported everything I've done so far. This is only the beginning. Get on the journey because this ride is going to be a lot of fun. We'll see you tomorrow at noon right here on the Jay Recher podcast.